Gracious Lord, we thank you for this gathering and all of those who have come into this space to begin to tackle the very concerns of our heart that we believe is central to your heart, our young people and what's happening in our communities. So Lord, we ask that you bless this gathering, allow us to connect heart to heart and breast to breast, that we might be able to leave this place having gleaned from the experiences and the encounters of one another to do the work. In Christ's name we pray, amen. I am Cynthia Gardner Brim, and for those of you who are eating, do not be concerned, we blessed the food earlier, amen. I wanted to give you a couple of housekeeping items. If you go past the security desk and on the down escalator to your left, and then the first two doors on your right will be the restroom facilities for each of you, so you won't have to continue to ask the people outside. It is past the security desk, down the escalators to your left, and then it'll be the rooms on your right. We also have a resource table up in the front, the round table with all those books on them. Those books are available for free, so please take as many as you like. If you would like more, please contact us. There is information on each table about New Life. You may contact me. I'm Cynthia Gardner Brim, the Director of Institutional Advancement, and we will connect you to sources where you might be able to obtain those materials for free. We also have them in Spanish if you should desire. We want to invite you to please have your lunch, and as we prepare for our panel discussions, we're going to invite you to relocate to the front of the room so that you can give your full attention to our panelists. Finally, I'm going to now invite those who have consented to be partners in this effort and those who are having a resource table over to my right. We're going to invite them to each come and share about a minute and a half of who they are, as well as their tables and the resources that they make available to our communities. All right? So we're going to take an opportunity first and kind of give them like a little clap. Just so I know that y'all are awake and listening, you know. It's a good day, it's a Monday, it's got some rain, but it's good to be here. And so with one of our first sponsors, one of our silent sponsors, first let me share, is the Inner Church Center with the Executive Director, Ms. Paula Mayo. They did not choose to take a table, but they have been instrumental in making this event come to pass. And so we're so grateful to them for their setup, for the space, and all the workers you won't see because they have already come in and made this place great for us. And so our second community partner is New York Theological Seminary. So I'm inviting a representative to come and share about them. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you to New Life from New York City for inviting us to be partners in having you all here today. You all are doing something that's very close to my heart, which is speaking to youth ministry practitioners here to share, network. New York Theological Seminary has been around 120 years. And I would like to say we're one of the best at doing urban ministry and what it looks like globally. So our table's right here in the front. We have information on our programs. We also have our Director of Institutional Advancement, Lanier Thomas, if you have any questions about that. And thank you.
Thank you, and we recognize that we have Dean Henry here who will be serving on our panel, and there are other distinguished New York Theological alum in the room, as well as I see Dr. Lundy up here in the front. Just wave your hand, NYTS. All right, thank you all so much for being in the room. And now we know we have a panelist, Javaro, police officer Javaro Long, who's here, and we're gonna let him come and share. They are still getting some resources for their table, but please let him share. Clap your hands.
How are you? What is it, good morning? Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. I appreciate all of you guys. This is nothing new for me, working with the community, working with youth, but the first with the church. So I'm a student of the game, and I want to learn from you guys and know what we can bring to the table. So I represent the Community Affairs Bureau, and within that bureau, there's something called the Options Program. And we go out in communities and we give youth different resources to help develop them and be that intermediary between the street, gang, and just awareness. Partnerships with Bank of America, Sony, Dell, T-Mobile, AT&T, So a lot of different resources. Come chat with me, and I'll inform you. Thank you.
And I see that we have representatives from WARM coming, and so we want to invite you to come to the table, followed by the representative from Urban Hope, and then we will go ahead and get started with our program.
Good afternoon. I was totally unprepared to do this, but I am from WARM. We are a domestic violence program. It stands for We All Really Matter. Steffi McGraw is the founder, and so I don't leave anything out. I'm just going to read a little, excerpt that we have to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a retired teacher, and God ordered my steps, and I ended up in this program. And I have been really blessed, and I hope I've been a blessing to many young people and old people and seniors who have come to this program. We've been able to provide services for them. So I will just read from our program. WARM, We All Really Matter, is a non-for-profit organization founded in 2010 by survivor Stephanie McGraw. WARM is dedicated to providing a personal approach to healing by walking with survivors side by side in their journey. We empower women by sharing our own experiences and struggles that move survivors towards their personal journeys of rebuilding, restoration, and reconnecting within. We help navigate the front lines and serve those left with little to no aid. Going beyond formalities, we support survivors and our community effectively by cutting through the bureaucracy that too often derails, delays, and blocks real help and the care they really need. WARM is dedicated to providing community-based resources to victims and survivors of domestic violence, addressing the varied needs of individuals in their healing and recovery from abuse. We are fierce advocates for a world free of systemic violence. Thank you. And if you visit our table, we have more resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Urban Hope. Someone from Urban Hope in the room? Okay, we see that there is a table there for Urban Hope, and I'm sure at a later time they will be able to come and make a presentation. Also on the resource table that has the books, you'll see information from the Department of Children and Youth Development, right? See, DYCD. They were not able to make it, but they sent some materials, and among that material is opportunities for partnership with churches and community organizations. Feel free to take those materials as well. We also have a representative, I believe, from the Senate, and we want to invite you at this time to come and introduce yourself and share from your heart.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Miss Sabrina Ellis. I'm also an evangelist Dr. Sabrina Ellis, with the New York State Senate and under Senator Cordell Clear. And we also is partnering with many organizations. Senator Cordell Clear, as you know, has come into the Senate, hitting the ground and running. And so we absolutely is partnering with our schools, with WARM, with Street Corner Resources, and other organizations to help our communities, help our schools, help our churches. We are actually working with a church right now, one of the bishops that passed away from COVID, and we are working diligently with that church to make sure that that church gets what they need through the capital funding that our Commander-in-Chief has now released for the churches, to help churches with a lot of what's much needed work in the body. So thank you so much. I have my cards for anyone who needs a card. If you need any help with anything, I am here. God bless and thank you.
Okay, so all of those presentations should have given you ample time to complete your lunch meal. And so at this time, we're going to be inviting you to make your transition toward the front of the room, taking a seat in these front chairs, so that we will be preparing for our panelist discussion. I am going to invite Sister Apostle Only Love Austin to come to the mic, where she is going to do the official welcome and share with you how this came about. So as you make your transition.
Let's give 1 second to transition.
Okay, those from Urban Hope are in the room now. We're going to just give them an opportunity to share as well. Thank you.
Sorry, I was delayed. I had to park my car. But it's great to see everybody here today. I'm the president of Urban Hope, and been serving in the North Shore of Staten Island for about 30 years now. Pastored a church there across from the West Brighton housing projects for 26, and then in the last 5 years have been really working hard on seeing that all of the public housing communities in New York City are adopted by local churches. And we have, if you serve in or around, we've been able to establish a relationship with NYCHA, so that if you would like to do events within the NYCHA communities, we can help you to get the permits necessary to be within the footprint of NYCHA. That's where I would say 80% of the brokenness and some of the challenges that we experience in our city, you'll find centered in our NYCHA communities. And we've also, over the last several years, developed streams of resource to supply local churches with outreach resources. So my table back there has several. New Life is a hub, a resource hub that we work together with, but we have a large warehouse in Philadelphia and about 5 hubs around New York City, where if you say, hey, we'd love some Gospels of John, we'd love some children's books, we'd love some outreach books, Max Lucado, Lee Strobel, some in Spanish and English, we would love to partner with you and help to supply you as you reach out in your neighborhoods. So when I was pastoring in my my church in West Brighton, we first began the church there when it had the second, that our community, our precinct had the second highest murder rate in New York City. And it's not a plan for church growth and church flourishing. It's very difficult. It's difficult to, a lot of the people that would normally finance a church and help to make it prosper won't come to the neighborhoods that we often serve in. So I couldn't afford, to fix the black mold sheetrock in the Sunday school room, let alone buy extra outreach resources. But I'm just grateful that right now the Lord has opened a door where I think we brought in about $50 million in outreach resources over the last 7 years to New York City. Some of you have utilized them, the coloring books, the children's books, and if you haven't, please just get on, jump on board. You just have to sign up at JesusWeekUSA.org. We run kind of a big push outreach initiative called Jesus Week, but we call it a saturation to transformation movement, because it begins with gospel saturation, but all of us have been serving in broken communities for long enough, and we know that a hit and run is not effective to heal communities, but if we start with a beachhead, a saturation event, and then bring together the believers in a community and bring together the nonprofits and the principals and the police and local pastors, then we'll see the capacity to see long-term healing, transformational growth. So we call that aspect, the transformational aspect of healing public housing, our Cities of Joy campaign. We believe that our NYCHA communities are not 1,000 miles away from being places of joy, but about 10 hard miles away. If any of you have served in some of these communities, you've seen that 80 to 90% of the residents there are just beautiful, hardworking, loving their families people, but about 10% have been broken soul to such a degree that they resort to criminality or addictive behavior and violence. But if we can bring those 90%, those 85% together, or at least 30% of them. So we even, there's the 10% sociological tipping point that we're looking to bring about in every public housing community, that we can say, hey, let's get 10% together on the same page, on the teams, one teaming it to bring healing, and we see that when that happens, amazing thing happens. Amazing turns can happen in our community. It'll be 5 to 10 hard years, but we know that the Lord can do anything wherever we put our feet. But sometimes we put our toe and then we leave. We put a toe and we leave. But if we put our feet down and we say in Jesus' name, Jesus can do anything. So my table's over there. You can get any more contact information. Again, if you sign up at JesusWeekUSA.org, all of the resources are available. We get about 30 tractor-trailer loads of resource every year, and we distribute to churches all in the Northeast. But our main core is New York City, the 5 boroughs. So we would love for all of you to take advantage of any of that. And we get a tractor-trailer load of Costco returns every month too. So if you say, hey, we would love to do a festival with some household items, just let us know. And whatever we have is yours. It's for the Church of Jesus Christ throughout New York and throughout our Northeast region. So thank you very much. It's been great to meet you all today, and love the work of New Life. With David Jackson and I have been just enjoying our partnership in Christ. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is one more. We'll have one more who's going to have a table set up in a moment. This is someone I absolutely wanted here. I was in a crunch. I was responsible for doing a community fair for my church organization. All other people kind of backed out, and I thought, how am I going to get this done? And I called Andre Jenkins at Fresh Start. And when I tell you, he showed up with a team of people, helped to organize that entire street fair, went down into the local community and compelled the young people to come, did activities with them, came with all kinds of partners. Before I tell you his whole business, let me introduce Andre Jenkins of Fresh Start.
So you can't believe everything she said. Really, it wasn't that serious. So hello, good people. How are you? My name is Andre Jenkins. It's my pleasure. There's a term that people use in society. They say, our children are at risk. That's a lie. They're underserved. That's kind of hard though. People, Andre, why you so hard? Because it's a fact. If you give children the opportunity to do what they want to do, they excel. You just have to pique their interest and find out what it is. Fresh Start is that. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure. Fresh Start is that. So when Cynthia called me and said, hey, Andre, I need you. When I was a child, no one had the ability to call folk and help. That's just what it was. Forgive me. It is what it is. Today, Fresh Start gives the children and the community, men, women, and children alike, the opportunity to thrive. And we thrive with love. I'm a wretch, but God blesses me. That's the beginning, middle, end of it. I'm going to put something out. Cynthia, I'm at work right now, literally. She said, Andre, I need you to come right now. I came right now. When I parked, it wasn't raining. I came out the garage, it's raining now. I'm like, Jesus. I love Jesus, in case you didn't. I really, really love God. And that's where it begins for me. I'm not going to hold you guys. Fresh Start stands for Families Receiving Educational Opportunities Now. FSAI Now. Fresh Start Affirmation Incorporated. It was birthed by a woman whose husband and the 3 men in her life, her little boys, were all involved with the criminal justice system. And so because she couldn't and didn't know how to get the things that she needed to be okay, not to thrive, just to be okay, she created it out of frustration. And she called me to ask her for help, and now Fresh Start is everywhere. We're New York City, Neon stakeholders. Everything that we can do to help our communities, wherever you are. As long as you're in the tri-state area, we're going to come. We don't have the capacity of bandwidth to go national yet, but we have enough folk. We have a good army of people. We're raising preachers. We're raising pastors. We're not raising sheep. want people to lead, so we give them the ability to do that. That's what it is. I'm gonna put some literature on the table. Forgive me, freshstartfamily.org is the website. The email address is fsainow.com. Please don't use the .org, it's my mistake, I wrote the wrong thing. But our communication is on the website, you can contact us live. If you hit it up, it's available. I appreciate you good people, thank you for having me.
So before we continue, and before I invite Apostle Austin, I'm going to wait. That sound is a warning, and they're going to give instructions afterwards. So I don't want her to be in the middle of her presentation while they give instructions. So we'll just wait for them to give instructions.
All right, isn't this prophetic? We got an alarm going off and we're waiting for instructions. I feel that's why God has gathered us here today, because there's an alarm going off and I'm not sure if we all are staying still enough to get the instructions. I feel that there are some instructions for us today. And as we wait physically, I ask that you also spiritually position yourself to wait and hear what the Almighty has to say for us concerning young people in the city. I believe you're here today because you care about young people in New York. Is that true? Yeah. Now, I want to say one thing while we're waiting. First of all, I'm Dr. David Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of New Life in New York City. I went to an event the other night. It was with faith people, and it was really boring and stuffy. What did I say? Faith people. Faith people. It was really boring and stuffy, and it kind of feels stuffy up in here. I don't know what that's about. So, listen, I just landed from Atlanta this morning at 9:30 and ran over here. I didn't do all of that to come to some stuffy, boring event. We came to have a good time. We came to exchange information and meet people. So, what I want to do is, before we move along, I think it would be helpful if we could, I know we're not at church, but I'm going to pull a church move, if you would stand up and find somebody you do not know, keep a nice distance that's feel comfortable for you, and introduce yourself and tell them why are you at the event, what brought you to the event. So come on, find someone you do not know. I know there's a lot of NYTS people in the house. Let's talk, let's get to know people, tell them why you're here. All right.
A lot of new faces.
Thank you for greeting people, meeting new people. Hopefully you made a new connection. That's what we're here to do, is make some new connections, strengthen already existing connections. Thank you so much for engaging us in that. Well, without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome my sister and my friend, Apostle Only Love Austin. She often says, yes, my first name is a phrase, Only Love. Yes, Apostle Only Love Austin. She's going to come and provide us some context for how this event even came to be. So let's give her a big hand as she comes, all right?
Thank you so much to my big brother, Dr. David Jackson, who prayed me and many people through Union Theological Seminary right down the block, made sure we graduated with our faith not being in the cemetery. You know, they make that joke about seminary. So shalom and good afternoon. As he said, my name is Apostle Only Love Chica Austin, and I'm the founder of Prophetic Whirlwind Ministries, which is a messianic ministry rooted in the faith and culture of West African Jews. I'm also the co-founder of Daughters for Justice, which is a women's clergy group for women faith leaders who want to help radically change policing in our city. And as I look around the room, I see many faith leaders and organizations that I've partnered with over the years. And we're here today to really talk about partnership for our young people, to save our young people. I'm on the faculty of NYTS for their Sing Sing and Correctional Facilities master's programs, where the individuals who are incarcerated are studying theology. And many clergy in New York City, whether we know it or not, actually came through that critical program. But before all of that, I was a young woman or a girl in New York City whose family experienced homelessness, and in a year, we went from being a coherent family with a house in Queens to going into shelters, and my little brother and I going into the foster care system. And the 13 years of faith-based organizing and nonprofit leadership that I've dedicated myself to, and of course ministry, comes out of the testimony that I have of what my family went through. But not just what my family went through, but how my grandmother mobilized to take us out of foster care. And she recently transitioned, but I'll never forget that. Or how Urban Youth Alliance's Seekers Club, under Reverend Wendy Calderon Payne, created youth-led Bible studies that myself and 2 other people led, and all 3 of us are in ministry today, 2 graduates of Union. I would later go on in 2019 to join the staff of Urban Youth Alliance to start their first advocacy and organizing department. So I went from a young girl in kinship foster care, participating in their youth-led Bible study, to returning years later, much older, to help lead their advocacy work. And so as we think about partnerships and resourcing our youth, I want you to realize that the young people you work with today are going to be the solution to the problems in New York City tomorrow. Can we say that? Amen? Amen. Y'all still with me? The young people that you work with today will be the answer to gun violence in New York City, will be the answer to domestic violence. Shout out to WARM and Miss Stephanie McGraw, the founder. As a messianic follower of Yeshua, we teach about the Torah every week. And often when I'm teaching Torah to women, I go back to Moses and all the women that helped him and saved his life. But often we forget one key woman, and that woman is Pharaoh's daughter. We don't even have her name. She's the one that pulled Moses out of the Nile after his mother put him in the wicker basket. She broke her own father's law by taking Moses, sparing his life, mother, and then having him be raised in Pharaoh's palace. And of course it would be the providence of God that the man to take down Egypt would be raised in the palace of Egypt in all the ways of Egypt. And so why do I say that? Before I briefly share how this is a result of an organic conversation, but I want to lift up Pharaoh's daughter and how she pulled Moses out of the Nile, and how my grandmother pulled me out of the Nile of foster care. And I want to ask each and every person this morning, not just the mothers, but the fathers and the brothers and the sisters and the youth, who are we pulling out of the Nile this morning? As we're upset about youth gun violence and mass incarceration, who are you pulling out of the Nile? This event is not just for us to come and hobnob and see people we know and meet people we don't know, but this is to resource you. So this summer, you can pull a young person out of the Nile of drug addiction, of gun violence, of homelessness. And so I want you to hold that question in mind as the panelists speak. Which young person are you going to pull out of the Nile this summer? Because if Pharaoh's daughter didn't pull Moses out of the Nile, he wouldn't have grown up to be the solution to the oppression of the Hebrews. And so this conversation comes out of an organic lunch that I helped put together. I love like networking and connecting people. So I knew my brother was coming back to New York to lead this awesome youth nonprofit, New Life. And I've known Pastor Gil Monrose, who is the executive director of Mayor Eric Adams' Office for Faith and Community Partnerships. And Pastor Gil does a lot of gun violence work. So I said, these 2 good brothers have to meet. And so we had a lunch at the Cornell Club. Dr. David graduated from Cornell. He has more degrees than a thermometer. I thought I had a He has a whole, he's a Dr. Bishop. And so we met at the Cornell Club, this place of great privilege. We're the only, we're the darkest faces in the room. And we joke and we get to know each other and we talk about ministry. Pastor Gil keeps Sabbath like me. But then we talked about the summer, and this meeting was in April. And we talked about how we knew this would be a very violent summer. And we talked about the role of not just the church, but faith communities in general. That if we actually looked within we have all the wisdom and the solutions to save our youth. And if we partner together, faith and community, we could come up with innovative solutions and programs for our young people this summer. Everything from summer jobs to activities to stop the violence. The answer is not out there. The answer is within us. As Yeshua Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. And so we don't look for someone else to save and love our youth. We have to do it, amen? Amen. And so as we talk, this just organically came up, this resource fair, this panel. It wasn't something that was planned with a 6-month strategic planning process, but I believe it was planned with the process of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. And so that's how this meeting came to be. Pastor Gil Monroe is sorry he's not able to be with us, but as one of the members of the Mayor's Faith Transition Team, we do give you greetings from the Office of Faith and Community Partnerships. And so I just want to encourage all of us to make sure that, yes, we have all we need to help our youth, but we don't have all we need in isolation. We have all we need in collaboration.
Yes.
We don't have all we need working in silos. We have all we need working in community. Just like Apostle Paul said about the body of Christ. The arm cannot work without the leg. The eyes cannot see without the heart. And so we want you to network today. We want you to take notes, to take business cards, to ask questions. But more than anything, as you leave, take a tangible action for a young person this summer, whether it's a new program, whether it's hiring them. Do something. This is not just an event to have an event, but this is an event to spark you to help our young people. Who are you going to pull out of the Nile this summer? As Jeremiah 29:7 says, seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Almighty on its behalf. For in its welfare, you will find your welfare. So thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Carl. We're trying to make sure we're staying safe and give it up for Carl. She understands the family. Thank you. Thank you so much, my sister, Apostle Only Love. What a beautiful Torah motif for us to keep in our mind as we move along today. Who are we pulling out of the now? And yes, this did come out of an organic conversation that we were having because we care about the city and we care about faith leaders. And we know oftentimes faith leaders are very strong in seeing what's happening and praying and desiring to see something different. But we know, as my sister said, that we are a part of the solution. The solution is in us. So we wanted to bring to you resources, and thank you. Can we also give a big round of applause to Reverend Cynthia Gardner-Brown for her, Minister Cynthia Gardner-Brown. I want to give you a cover to a church. And while you clap, I gotta acknowledge my big sister who took time out of her very busy schedule to come. Can we take out for Dr. Vandalyn Kennedy for coming? Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. I appreciate you. She's the international chairlady for youth for the Church of God in Christ, my denomination. So thank you so much for being here. But we wanted to bring resources to you because we know a lot of times you want to help young people, you want to be a support, but you don't know where the resources are. So please take advantage of these people who have come out to bring you the resources, not only to take things from their table, but engage them in a conversation about how you can possibly forge a partnership so that you can bring these resources to your community. Not only did we want to bring resources to you, but we also wanted to put together a panel of experts who can speak to you about what you may encounter as you begin to go out into the community. A lot of times we get this passion or this idea to engage in a project, but as the gospel says, we did not count the cost before we started building, right? Who starts building and doesn't count the cost, only to not have enough and have to stop and become a spectacle to everyone? And so we wanted to help you count the cost of what may happen if you begin to engage the young people in your community. Now, what we're encouraging you to do is to not take on the entire city. If Pastor Gill was here, that's what he would say. I'm not asking you to take on all the young people in New York City. That's a very daunting task. But Acts gives us a very clear model. Acts tells us, Jesus says to the disciples before he ascends, to start in Jerusalem first, then Judea and Samaria and the othermost parts of the earth. So start with your Jerusalem, which is your block. Start with your blocks in your borough and begin to identify the young people that you can pull out. So I've asked, along with Minister Cynthia, this wonderful panel. We had 2 additional people who had challenges and could not be with us today. They send their apologies, but we're so excited to have these 4 individuals who have taken time out of their schedule to come and engage in a very transparent conversation, okay? So we're gonna talk about some hard things. Is that okay? We're gonna talk about things that faith leaders may not like to talk about sometimes, but if you're going to directly engage the young people in your community, you have to be prepared to have these conversations. So allow me at this time to introduce our panel for this afternoon. We're so ecstatic to have Dr. Tamara Henry, who is the Vice President of Academic Affairs and the Academic Dean and Associate Professor of Religious Education at NYTS. Come on, NYTS, give it up for your dean. Previously, Dr. Henry served as the director of 2 of the seminary's degree programs, the Master of Arts in Religious Education and the Masters of Arts in Youth Ministry. So she's not just talking about it, she's about it, youth ministry. I know that for a fact. She's been a youth pastor for years. Dr. Henry graduated from Georgetown University with her Bachelor's of Arts in American Government. Additionally, she holds a Master's of Social Work from Fordham University. Excuse me, I have these Invisalign, so I'm learning how to talk with this in my mouth, so forgive me. From Fordham University Graduate School of Social Services and a Master of Arts and a PhD in Religious Education from Fordham University Graduate School of Religion. Give it up for Dr. Tamara Henry. Now, Dana, you're going to get me because I should know how to say your last name. How I say your last name? I was right. Okay, I didn't want to say it wrong. Racklin. Dana Racklin. Dana is a public safety expert and the executive director of the community-led movement We Build the Block. I like that. We Build the Block. WBTB. WBTB supports communities facing over-policing, mass incarceration, and gun violence. Dana has pioneered numerous other initiatives, public safety, and community programs over the years, including NYC Together, Project Lead, and WBTB's Get Out the Youth Organizing Arm Crew Count. In 2022, she was named a John Jay Public Safety Initiatives Fellows in their Punishment to Public Health Department. Please give a warm welcome to Dana Racklin. All right. Officer Javaro Long has been with the New York City Police Department for 17 and a half years. Currently with the Community Affairs Bureau's Opinions Program. He has served the NYPD most of his career in Lower Manhattan, but he is from the South Bronx. Can we give a warm welcome to Officer Javaro from the Boogie Down. And last but not least, the Reverend Dr. Donald Garner is the CEO of Clark & Garner, a comprehensive educational consulting and solutions firm. He is also the CEO of Blue Hands Entertainment, whose mission is to expose youth and young adults to careers in the creative industry. He also serves as the co-young adult pastor at the historic Greater Allen Cathedral AME Church in Queens under Drs. Floyd and Elaine Blake. Let's give a big round of applause to Dr. Garner. All right, so you see we got a pretty good panel up here. Would you agree? Yes. Would you agree? Yes. All right, so I'm gonna ask them some questions. I take this off. I'm leaning over, I'm too tall for this. Okay. So I'm gonna ask them 3 questions. And after I ask those 3 questions, there will be a time for you to ask some questions. So I want to encourage you that as you hear the conversation going on, if you have any questions, Jot them down. Hope you got the nice little notebook and pen when you came in. If you didn't, wave your hand. Somebody from our team will be glad to get you one. We got one right here that didn't get one. All right? Jot down your questions as we're going through the panel. And at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions. All right, panelists, you ready? Start with our first question. So there has been an increase of street violence involving youth in New York City over the last few months. This is a two-part question. What is one of the spiritual reasons as well as practical reasons for this increase? Who would like to start? Yes, please, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, you have to turn it language there. You go.
Can we hear? Okay. I think I just want to frame this out by saying, to go back to the introduction that we had about the woman who pulled the baby out of the river. Oftentimes we think about the baby in the river in our heads when we're thinking about doing this work as being the young people who are at risk or who are in need of services or whatnot. I think we need to think about the baby in the river as being people in power who are not spiritually aligned or have the mission, their real mission, aligned, and using their mission and power to support safe and healthy communities. So where we are awry in communities experiencing gun violence, the spirituality is lost among the power holders, the people who are elected, the people who have money, the people who are landlords and corporate. Those people's spirituality have been compromised. And a result of that is the increased violence that you're seeing in our communities that is wholly stoppable. And I tell you this not as somebody who's in academia or who thinks about this stuff because I read about it in the newspaper, but because I work directly with shooters, trigger pullers as the NYPD would call them. Every day I talk to them. Every day I'm with them. So the spirituality issue is of our own. It is not of those young people. We are morally compromised as power holders and as stakeholders and as people who have access to opportunity and power. A more practical reason why gun violence is arising because we refuse to do the work that it would take to have meaningful and intentional collaboration among city agencies, state agencies, and community-based organizations. And we are refusing to challenge ourselves to work with those who are trigger pullers and invest in them despite where they might have went awry to hurt others, to find redemption. We'd rather hold a press conference and brag about 15 guns and 7 years of watching them. We should be embarrassed. We should be disgusted with ourselves to stand up in front of a press conference with guns on a table and feel proud that we led 17 boys into a prison cell. So, we need to think strategically about how we can intentionally work together with all city and state agencies, federal agencies, community-based organizations to help young people who are the victims of the spirituality that has gone awry by the corruption in this country and this state. So that's my answer.
My mic sound nice, yeah. So, good afternoon, everybody. Certainly before I offer a response, I want to offer my thanks to Dr. Jackson and the New Life team, even for putting this powerful conversation together. And I'm so excited to have this conversation, and certainly for the gracious invitation to participate in what I consider to be a super important dialogue. So I will say this. I'll start off with an acknowledgement that street violence was an issue prior to the pandemic, right? So that's not new, but certainly we've seen some alarming spikes in the way of street violence.
And in one sense, on a practical level, that's not so surprising when we consider that the systems and networks in the way of programs and services that would help to mitigate youth violence, help to promote and support community safety in the way of educational programs that are serving young people, especially young people on the margins, in the way of after-school programs, the host of recreational programs, find themselves at this current moment in a state of upheaval. If you engage in dialogue with any youth worker, including youth workers in this room across sectors who identify themselves as among the most underappreciated, under-resourced, undercompensated, undervalued workers who now are trying to navigate through a new host of stressors where their programs and services have been severely limited or paused or removed altogether. If we don't resource adequately and support the people who are working with young people,
Right.
It shouldn't be surprising to us that the fallout from that is not seeing some of the positive outcomes in the way of reductions in youth violence among young people, particularly those on the margins. From a spiritual perspective, and I want to echo some of the sentiments that have been raised by Dana, my sister on the right, by saying, I know that we have a number of faith and thought leaders, and as a seminary dean who is focused on training faith and thought leaders to engage in relevant, restorative, and revolutionary forms of ministry, I will say that there's a need for the cultivation in our work on the ground with young people in faith context for a relevant spirituality. And what do I mean by relevant spirituality? Spirituality, right, because sometimes we assume that our spirituality that we're cultivating, our faith development practices is relevant, and they're not. And that takes a relevant spirituality that takes seriously, right, the needs, interests, and concerns of young people in a way that really offers them a viable alternative to life as it is. I think so many of the exodus of young people out of our faith communities is telling us that what you are offering is not meeting the need that I have. Secondly, and really briefly, and then I'll turn it over, I think in many ways street violence is offering us a mirror, right? Young people are really manifesting a larger culture of violence that they didn't create, but that they are simply revealing. And let me tell you how that culture of violence shows up. It finds expression in a spirituality of violence where we see faith leaders alongside these political leaders who are weaponizing faith and spirituality through advancing ultimately violent and harsh agendas that are doing harm, right, to young people who are living in some of these communities. So I just want to offer those two opening responses.
Thank you so much.
You see how Dr. Henry just looked at me? Like, she'll turn. After that great, powerful response. Thank you for everything that was just shared. And, you know, just to keep building on what you just said, Dr. Henry, as well as Dana, I think about Dr. King. One of his, you know, more profound quotes that I love is when he said, riots are the language of the unheard. And just this notion of, you know, whenever we are in our communities or not giving our youth opportunities to exercise their voices authentically in our schools, in our churches, etc., in our community centers, it does beget a stream of violence, right? A stream of alternative behaviors that are not so favorable to, you know, building our communities in the way that we know they need to be built. And my background comes from, well, one of my primary influences is in the education field. So I've studied, you know, read about and seen firsthand about the relationship between education and criminality, right? The association between education and criminality, I'll say differently. And I think when I look at, so most of my work these days is unpacking the educational trauma of our Black boys and girls in K-12 schools. And when I think about, you know, just an average child right now, but, you know, that's in the K-12 system, you know, schools are supposed to be the proverbial equalizer, you know, for our babies, right? Even kind of more so than churches. But not for me, I grew up old school Pentecostal, so church was my, you know, proverbial equalizer. But on average, right, schools are the proverbial equalizer for our children. And when I think about just the disparate, you know, resources and programming that tends to still be the case in a lot of our communities, especially Black and brown kids, you know, I can see firsthand where breakdowns start to occur, right? When schools are not connected to faith-based institutions and relevant nonprofit organizations that can provide supplemental cultural, social, and academic capital that the schools don't have, right? When you start to see those elements, I can see where, and I see it all the time, where our students just start to drift, right? And instead of them being plugged into our schools and all of what it could offer them, as well as the relevant organizations that could support, they drift off into other arenas, and oftentimes it is violence. And so I think even if, as a faith-based organization, if you are located in Queens, in Brooklyn, if we can even on a practical level adopt 3 to 5 schools, 1 to 2 schools, right? That you can say, okay, we're gonna lean in on these 2 schools, and I'm gonna get with this other church and these other churches, and we're gonna come and provide this additional level of capital and support, right? So that these kids don't go astray. You can track in real time where your students are going once they get out of school, right? Because you can be in the hallways, you can go into the lunchrooms and have conversations, you know, with what is happening with our kids on an everyday basis. And a lot of times get the data that you need, right? So when you talk, Dr. Jackson, about counting the cost, you know, if you're in the system, you can get the data and you can start counting the cost about what is actually happening that's leading to a lot of idle behavior. So, you know, that's one of my responses that I would say on what could be done on a practical level to address some of the violence that we're seeing in our communities.
I want to say before Officer Long, I want to jump in on this data piece, because I know Dana would, amen, this 1,000%. A lot of times we're making decisions out of our emotions and our spirituality with no data. How can you fight something you don't know what you're fighting and then come up with a strategic plan for how you're going to approach? You need data, but without the relationships and without the connections, you won't get access. And then something I learned from Dana is you got to know what data to ask for. Sometimes you think you're asking for the right data, but because you don't know the system, they can keep you out because you don't know what to ask for. So I'm gonna ask Officer Long to jump in, and then Dana, can you speak to that piece as well?
How's everybody doing? So the good thing about this, right, is that I'm a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of resources. Maybe not as deep as the other panelists, because I'm over here nervous listening to you guys speak. But the best thing is for me is that I'm a product of my environment. So I'm not sitting here, you know, as a New York City police officer. I'm sitting to you as a kid from the South Bronx, a product of my environment. I come from a nonprofit organization. I come from, you know, watching the police take me and my sister out of the house because my mother made poor choices. I come from the example of why you're here and why I'm here. So I'm here to give you something, not just to talk. And when you spoke about data and you talk about resources and you talk about the community and the gangs that you deal with, I'm a product of all of it. I could leave here right now, change my clothes and go right back to them same neighborhoods. But the thing is, right, I have a choice. So because I have that choice, I had a mentor who left, came back and got me and changed my life. You know, I was a kid in South Bronx. He was in Tribeca, millions of dollars. But guess what he did? He changed my life. He had me graduate high school, sent me off to college so I could stay away at college. 17 and a half years later, I'm here with you. So it's not, what I want to tell you, it's not about, you know, your education or your knowledge. It's about going in the community. You got to educate the people that you want to talk to. We could sit here and do this all day. But if you're not tapping somebody and you bringing them along with you, you know, Rosa Parks did that, right? Underground Railroad, slavery, that's what you got to do. So I do this. You know, I got my boy Reverend Cohen in the back. I just called him last minute, he showed up. I hit up Stephanie McGraw, she showed up. I'm the guy that can call people. They're not saying no, they're saying how can I help? So I'm here to help you.
And having people like him in the room is important to connect, but let me say something, if I may, before Dana speaks. Oftentimes, people like Officer and other people here who are connectors anticipate that faith leaders are gonna come with their hands out and nothing to partner.
Come on.
So as you are connecting, don't come with your hand out, what I need, can you give me? Or just use them for the connection. And then once they connect you, there's no acknowledgement that, or cultivation of that relationship, right? So it's not just connecting with Officer Long because he's the plug, right? He can get you connected to this place or that place or this person. But I authentically want a relationship with you for the sake of the work that we're doing. The byproduct of that relationship is that he also then connects me, but then you also connect. You also share information. You welcome him into your faith community, all right? So I want to bring that out. Dana, talk about the specific data that we're looking for in certain instances.
So, just before I get into that, I want to bring into the room that my partner was Michael K. Williams, who passed away on September 6th of 2021. And he has a book coming out in August that he wrote before he died. And he talks about, the book is about his life, but really it's about community work. And he talks about, it's not about getting out. It's about being welcomed back home. And so I think it's important as faith leaders that we think about, or you think about, not a faith leader, I wish I was, that, you know, are you welcomed home? And home being the community that you serve. Not just in your house of worship, but along all of the streets. Can you come back? Can you see yourself in the people that maybe are not chasing you down to come into your church, right, or your institution? So I just want to raise that idea of coming back, because I know you do a lot of work. It's not about getting out, it's about coming home. And as far as the data goes, so I think it's important that we're specific when we talk about this stuff, and I'm not giving you grand ideas that you can't name, touch, or feel. So a great example, just because we have Warm here, is domestic violence. If you look at all the young men that I service right now, you will find that their name as a child was on a DIR, domestic incident report. So there was domestic violence in their home, and they were victims, either seeing it or actually feeling it, right? We know that those things are somewhat the same. So if we were able to say, okay, precinct, whatever we work in, can I work with your domestic violence officers and specifically service the youth that we know are in homes that have domestic violence? That will make your impact extremely intentional, right? Because we know that those young people are much likely to grow up and carry a gun and perpetrate violence. So now you're not going to your youth officer and just saying, hey, let's do a community event together. Let's do a Cops and Kids basketball game and open it up to the community. Lovely. I don't participate in that, sorry. But I think that's a waste of resources. And when I say resources, I mean...
Why do you think it's a waste of resources?
Because you're having people self-select to come. It costs a ton of money on the front end with police resources being there. And it's never going to change the interaction of that community. Like, we've been doing Cops and Kids basketball games for generations. Has that stopped the violence? Has that changed the angst? If it did, we wouldn't have had the uprising of 2020. So we need to be, again, using data. If you guys want to do basketball games, that's fine. I don't choose to use my time or resource that way. But if we're, hold on. So if we're gonna, I don't want to have a conversation about Cops and Kids basketball games. So I don't waste any time. But
She said it doesn't work, and I want to counter that it does. In my eyes, it does work.
But it's okay to have different perspectives.
also, we're talking about very specific things, right? We're talking about stopping violence. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about very specifically stopping violence. So how do we intentionally stop violence? So a great way using data would be, hey, I want to work with your domestic violence officers, your DVOs, and specifically service and support the families that we know are having domestic violence issues. Because if I can work with those families as a faith leader, as a faith institution, I know that I am going to directly impact a trajectory of violence. Right? So that's a really, that's a data point, right? That's a place where you can go and ask for specific information. Another thing which I've been advocating for and advocating for and advocating for is that we're working, coordinating our efforts with violence interrupters, faith partners. I do this in Brooklyn with Pastor Monrose's God Squad, to work specifically with young people who are known to the department for carrying guns. So I'm not just doing a general event and whoever shows up, but saying I want to deploy resources specifically to young people who are known for carrying guns. Because if officer so-and-so is watching this young person, I need to be watching this young person. I'm not going to wait for an indictment. I don't need to wait for an arrest or a shooting. If you're watching this young person, I want to be watching this young person. I want to be intervening with this young person. So again, that's another, there's lists inside of every precinct which tells who is actually committing the violence. Because here's another thing, you could walk past a NYCHA development, you could be like, oh, those kids are up to no good. You have no idea. A trigger puller is not every kid you see in NYCHA. It's very, very rare. So we need to be specific. Who are the kids that you are watching NYPD? Because I want them on my radar too. And that might mean that you have to do multiple touches before you get them engaged with you, right? You're not gonna show up and be like, hey, so-and-so, come to church. And they're gonna be like, absolutely, this was a divine intervention, right? But you're going to start to plant the seeds and hopefully that builds, right? And you're there for them. When there is a shooting and you're going outside, you're there to counsel that family, those friends. So now they're starting to see you more, you're present more, right? We have to be where the police are. If just the police are there, then just a carceral outcome will come and just more violence will come. We have to be where the police are and we have to be showing up. And then I think also we need to define what resources are. A lot of us say, I provide resources to the community. What does that mean? What does that mean? If I'm a young person, I need my GED. I need somebody to take me to the DMV to get my state ID. I don't just need a job. I need somebody to help counsel me to be ready to have a job. And something that we do in Brooklyn is the one thing I want to bring up, because I think it relates to the first part is, and there was a New York Times article about, it's called Heal the Violence. We put a young group of men who identify themselves as being part of a crew into group therapy, healing circles, every week. Together, they did it together. And that therapy has changed them. It has transformed their lives, right? And so therapy is a service, right? Not state therapy that is attached to prison or attached to ACS, but therapy with people that look like them, that are from their community, who see them, who have redemption for them, and who are not connected to the state and will use that against them, right? Where they can show up wholly as themselves. So I think when we're talking about data, we need to say who and what drives violence. I need to know who those people are, and I need to know the factors. Another thing, I did this in Brooklyn before the pandemic. There were 5,000 kids who got arrested for a robbery in 2018, 5,000. We have enough resources to help those 5,000 because we know 50% of them will go on to be arrested with a gun. That's the projection. If we mobilized around those 5,000, we could reduce violence, right? So the data is really important, and insisting that that be shared with you so you can activate intentionally is really critical.
How do you get that?
So yes, that's exactly where I was gonna go, Pastor Dave. This is great information. The first thing is doing the research to find out all these acronyms in the NYPD. Do you even know all these officers that even exist in the NYPD? Start there. but how do you get access to the list? It first starts with building the relationship with your precincts, all right? Building the relationship with the commanding officers, and then as you begin to go in and meet with them, you begin to say, hey, I need these lists, or I know you have these people, and they're gonna try to give you the runaround. Of course, I learned all this from listening to Dana. They're gonna try to give you the runaround at first. Well, we're having, you know, the case is still
It's an
ongoing.
open investigation.
I'm not trying to get involved in your investigation. I just wanna know who these people are. Because like she said, if you're watching them, I wanna be watching them, and these are the specific resources and programs we can bring to them. Yeah, but you gotta have the resources, you have to have a plan, right? And that's why I said in the beginning, it's one thing to have the heart and the passion to want to see your community change or to see something happen for young people. It's another thing to actually have a plan and then have the resources. And you may not even have all the resources, but you got to have something, right, to bring to the table. And if you come with something, then other agencies and things will be more likely to come beside you and bring it forth. Now, it got a little lively up here when Dana said that the cops and basketball things don't work, right? I think...
It's just an ROI thing. It's a return on investment. How much are we spending and how much are we getting back?
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with that, then it's fine with me.
But go ahead, Officer Long.
You know,
Speak to that.
It's not a bad thing. It's not, you know, everybody's entitled to how they feel. So something I did, right, personally. So what Dana was saying, the cops and kids in the basketball interacting in the community. I was doing community affairs for 2 years. You know, I felt like that something had to stop because you can't show up after the fact, right? You have to do something else. You have to be present. You have to still stay present. I'm just one officer. I represent me, not the NYPD. Understand that. And I keep saying that when I speak to you because it's genuine. So what I did was I went out and I spent over $10,000 of my own money and started DJing in the park. So I use music. I rap. I write songs. I work with Tony Danza. I do the Cops and Kids. I do the Police Athletic League. I work with the First Responders Children's Foundation. I work with the Police Foundation. This is passion. This is things that I want to do. And there's a result behind that. That's all. There's a result behind it. It might not work for everybody and everything. And the other thing is all this, the data she's talking about is accessible. It's wealth of knowledge. You know what they say, when you want to hide something, you put it.
Officer, what advice would you give them if they come into a precinct and want the information? How should they move? How should they proceed? So you can hear me for the recording. I asked them, if you went to the precinct right now and wanted to get this information, what advice would you give them for how they proceed? How do they even approach the commander or whoever? How do you do that if you've never done it?
Every precinct, last Wednesday of the month, has those community meetings. Regardless of what your relationship was, all my encounters with the police were negative. And look at me, I became a police officer, a change. So you have to start with the dialogue, right? You can't extract something or assume or think that the commander is this or the precinct is that. You're a final officer like me. You have to start the dialogue. When you get up out your chair, you go into communities. If we form a coalition and say, hey, on this day we're going to tackle this precinct. On this day we want to have a conversation with this commander. We can set that up. I can set that up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The same way you're here now, you can go to the local precincts and do the same thing.
Let me ask you a question. How would they find out which precinct their church or their organization is in? How do they find it out?
You know, you look up your address. You know, when you put in your address and you find a local precinct, Google Maps, you can find a local precinct. And then you start that approach. You ask for the local community affairs officer within your precinct, and then you start that dialogue with the community affairs officer. You're not gonna just walk in and jump right to the commander and start grilling them. You start a relationship with the community affairs officer, the youth officer.
Great, thank you. Dr. Henry.
Yeah, so I wanted to respond to, not for us to be talking about cops and kids and basketball, but I think this is a punctuation point. Our work with young people is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And sometimes we're looking for immediate short-term gains. It doesn't necessarily, and I get the point that we've got to be mindful of how we're investing resources. Is this program really worth it, right? It might be appropriate the resources in some other ways, but I'll give you a quick example. We've had like Explorer programs that have engaged, right? And a lot of community kids that might not be rooted in faith community might attend that. I'll tell you what happens. they see a cop who's a part of that program paroling their neighborhood. And what that young person done, this has happened routinely in my own work with young people in faith community. They might not know that cop, they reach out to me. Do you think you could link me with officer so-and-so? And I tell you, that cop who has forged a relationship through that 1 or 2 programs that community kid has engaged in, now is looking for an advocate, right? Who can advocate, help them navigate the system. I've seen it time and time again, so I don't think we can underestimate the investment in some of those programs that don't seemingly seem to provide returns immediately, but we are on a pilgrimage with young people, right? We are on a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
To add to that point, so I'm sorry. I ran into, I think about 2 years ago before the pandemic, I ran into a guy and he comes up to me at the Pride Parade on the West Side Highway and he goes, hey man, I've been looking for you for 4 years. I'm like, me? He's like, yeah. So immediately I'm like, you know, what did I do? He goes, no, you used to stop me downtown in the Smith houses. Guess what? He's a police officer. He said, I became a cop because of you.
But here's the last point though, like that's, sorry, because we need to put data and we need to put numbers on things, right? The basketball program that has been going on with the NYPD, they are using forfeiture money to refurbish basketball courts at a whopping cost of $600,000 each. Plus, so now the forfeiture money is coming from those communities, and I think those communities should decide if they want it to be spent on basketball courts, and maybe they do, or they want it to be spent on Wi-Fi so that kids can access their homework, or if they want it to be spent on trauma response counselors when there's a shooting. Just, we need to be clear. And then also, there is absolutely zero metrics that have come out of the Explorer program, Ceasefire, Options, Cops and Kids Basketball. If we are talking about millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and I get it, not everything you could put a number on. You cannot put a number on everything. Trust me, I know this. But if we're talking about decades of hundreds of millions of dollars in both capital and operational and discretionary funding, we need to have some basis of metrics, and the community should be a part of the conversation about how money is spent in their community, from their community, and who is in their community and how they're in their community. Because for some people, they want to play basketball and they are experiencing trauma when they see 500 cops from the Community Affairs Bureau playing basketball in their community. They have a trauma response to that. So I'm not saying it's not good, and we can talk about this all the time, but we have to, all the facts have to be laid, which is what does it cost us?
Right.
And what are the outcomes? And is that the outcomes that we desire? That's
So
all.
let me jump in, because we can sit here for a minute. People have questions. Please write down your questions, and we're almost at the end of our time, so I'm gonna surge ahead.
Sorry.
But I do want to say that, and it's probably fresh in my mind because I'm dissertating right now, you have to have numbers and stories.
Come on.
Right, you gotta have qual and quant. You have to balance those out. So I think, Danny, you're 1,000% right that we're gonna be spending all this money. Communities need to decide where that money goes, and it needs to go in directions that we really see the change. And we know the population that needs to be impacted, but we skirt around that population, right? That's what I'm hearing from what you're saying. At the same time, there are young people who are positively impacted by their encounters with law enforcement. I know for a fact when I was a cop in Atlanta, there were many young people who were impacted by seeing me come to their school and read, seeing me ride around in the community, and I knew their names, and I responded to them differently. If they were standing on the corner and the store owner says, I got these kids standing on the corner, these Kane kids, oh, we talking about JoJo and Leroy? I want to say JoJo and Leroy, get them up here, go home. Hi, officer, I don't fool with the 12, but you all right, I guess, so I'll go home, right? So those relationships that I established with those young people made a difference, and it also impacted how I responded to them, right? The last thing I'll say, we move on, I met a young man at the train station probably a week or two ago, and this is gonna lead us to our next question. He saw me, I was dressed up, having a certain tie. He said, what do you do? Are you a lawyer or something? I said, no, I'm not a lawyer, I lead an organization. He started telling me about his interests, and so we exchanged numbers, and come to find out, he's in a steep period of transition. Homelessness, got put out of foster care, a number of things. And so I have invested my life into his life. And just in a week, my wife was listening to a conversation we had yesterday. She said, wow, he sounds like a completely different man in just a week. He has housing now, he has a job. He got a job. He got a job now, he called me yesterday, he said, Doc, you think I could go to school? My GPA is not that strong, what should I do? I said, no, listen, this is what I would advise that you do, just work it in phases. And I think he said, okay, Doc, I believe what you said, because you're the only man that has ever taken an interest. So I shared that not to bring attention to what I'm doing, I shared that to lead into our next question. And here's the next question. Current research suggests that this generation is one of the loneliest and most stressed of all generations. Springtide Research Institute, write that down. Springtide Research Institute did an awesome study on belonging. Okay. The research also suggests that they are seeking for belonging relationships. That's the key phrase, belonging relationships, which means that they are looking for safe adults with whom they can build lasting relationships and feel that they are seen and recognized. So to the panelists, what are some strategies you would suggest to faith and community leaders to build belonging relationships with the youth right in front of their ministries?
I'll start.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Henry, I actually want to pull from something you said to us last year when we were on the panel. And Sharice and I, I have used it probably like 1,000 times since then. So I'm so happy and honored that I can actually quote something you said in front of you. But Dr. Henry said something that was so profound in terms of what our youth, Generation Z, are contending with. One of the characteristics is that they have this intense self-reliance, right? And so that, in other words, what that means is that because of all of the external factors that are, that they are experiencing right now in this world, and because they don't have safe relationships that they can, carry their burden with, they have shouldered and they're wearing all of these, problems and situations in their hearts and in their souls in a manner in which developmentally, they can't handle, right? And it's created, even more anger and discontentment and so on and so forth. And so, that has sat with me in terms of when I'm working with young people and I'm listening to their, issues, I can feel that they're just, really bogged down, right? And when I think about belonging, my dissertation, I finished it in 2020, and I've been working for the past 15 years with men coming home from prison. And so at one of the main findings, and my dissertation was on thriving actually, for people coming home. And so a lot of what I learned is that when people are coming from very unfortunate circumstances, usually the family unit is where they experience most of their stressors, right? Because there's a lot of ambivalence, there's a lot of, just anger and resentment for them not performing well, them not doing what they're supposed to do. And a lot of their abuse and neglect even comes from people that share their own blood, right? And so and as an aside, we know that, we understand that, your relationships doesn't have to be about, blood, right? And we know as a body of Christ, that sometimes can be the greatest family, right? That you can have even more so than your blood. But back to the point, what I've learned in my dissertation and after evaluating reentry programs for the past 15 years is that sometimes, strangers, and I love the show Perfect Strangers. Sometimes people you've never met can be the best people that you've ever come across to support you on your trajectory. And so I worked with churches who had never met these men and women, in their entire lives, and they brought them into their space. And here's the part that I think that really can go back to how do you establish belonging. Dr. Henry, you just talked about it. You set the stage when you said that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. What we've learned in our programs, and when I go across the country, consulting with people who want to do reentry work, which is the same with this work, is that if you're going to create a program, it cannot be 2 months. It cannot be 30 days. You have to at the least be committed to a year, at the very least. And if you don't have, as an individual church, that resource, partner with 2 or 3 other churches who can supplement resources so that you all can have at least a 12-month calendar, right, to get down and dirty with the issues that our young people are experiencing, right? And one of the last points that I'll make that I found that was a part of my findings that I didn't think was gonna be even profound. When we did our qualitative focus groups and structured interviews, we discovered that all of the participants said eating a meal with people, with each other, right, and with new people was the greatest part of the program, right? Here it is, I'm thinking it's the facilitation skills that we put in place. Now that does matter, right? You can't put anybody up facilitating and talking to your young people crazy, but eating a meal, having that connectedness, right, they had never experienced before. These are grown people, right? So can imagine the impact that, our young people, what eating a meal can have, with them. So if you are doing a program, it needs to be long-term oriented, and you gotta have these very beautiful touch points that can ultimately help them see that they're human and that they belong somewhere. So those are my offerings that I would lift up, that you gotta have an infrastructure. You can't just, be out here. I mean, you can be out here if you want to, but if you're committed, this is about, because what I try not to do is to tell churches what they should be doing, right? Like, everybody has a different flavor, so you don't have to take on youth development work if you don't want to. If street violence is your issue, that's your issue. But for those who are trying to work with young people, at least commit your programs to, 12 months, and beyond. And I think you can see some good findings and some outcomes as a result.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garner. I want to say churches vary in capacity, right? Some have big budgets, some have little budgets. If you don't have money, if you don't have a shiny, fancy program, I tell you the greatest currency that you can have is in relationships. And not just relationships, but I think this sense of belonging that we're referencing over and over again is in our ability to forge authentic connections with young people, heavy on the authentic connections with young people. And I think one route to doing that is starting on a very simple fundamental lesson, on a fundamental level, which has to do with our ability just to see and hear. Just to see and hear. You'd be surprised at the young people living in faith communities, living in schools, living in institutional contests, collecting thousands of dollars that are supposed to be serving young people who don't even know young people's names, who don't see them, who don't listen. And I think muteness and invisibility are 2 of the most pronounced barriers to facilitating a sense of belonging, to forging authentic connections with young people. And let me also offer, if you are sitting here and you're thinking of some fancy program that you want to engage in your faith community, but you got young people sitting in your own household that you can't even forge authentic connection with, I'm going to tell you to think again.
That's real.
Start there first.
That's a whole word.
And come back later. Start there first.
And if I could say, the Bible says charity starts at home, and then and the pandemic gave us an opportunity to return back to our homes, but the question is, how many of us fixed our homes in the pandemic as we're rushing back to normalcy?
I'm gonna just start and be real short. Again, it goes back to mentorship. Somebody came and got me. You know, my high school math teacher, Derek Phillips, Real Dads Network, 9th grade, said to me, instead of, rapping at lunchtime, I'm gonna go out and get these books for you. Guess what? Got those books and I passed with flying colors. And I overheard a teacher doubting me. But look, somebody came and got me. So it starts with influence. We could do this all day. But if you're not tapping into the parents of those youth, you're still gonna be lost. So if we're not coming together and trying to influence the community together, you can tackle the youth, but then what about those youth with the parents? You know, my mentor, when I would go have these fancy dinners in Chelsea, one time I told him, I said, you see, we sitting here eating. You going back to 23rd Street, I'm going back to the Bronx. But the relationship that we have, and I meet with them all the time. I'm 42 years old. My oldest is 21, 13, and 9. So back to what she was saying, absolutely I'm influential at home, the same way I could be as a police officer. So I can speak to you with a voice and say, I'm doing the work. I just want to do it with you. So faith, church, community, the people, we got to do it together because the dialogue can always happen. But then where's the result?
I think, So I just want to put things into like actionable and also national views so two things. One is the National Mental Health Commission has already said that youth suicide and mental health challenges is the highest it's ever been.
Absolutely.
Right? Like the highest. So we have to understand it's not, this feeling of loneliness can manifest itself into self-harm. Or what my partner Michael used to say, some of us are innies, some of us are outies. Innies hurt ourselves and outies hurt others. So those boys that are picking up guns are no different than the kids that are hurting themselves, right? There's that trauma, that element there. What's coming online federally later in July is something called 988. So instead of 911, there's 988, where people can call for a mental health emergency response versus a police response. So you're seeing an adaptation of how we use systems to try to meet this moment, right? That's a change, that's a real shift. And we all can rally around that shift because that's the beginning, right? The next step is behavioral health drop-in centers, where you see somebody in crisis and instead of calling 911 and they go do 24 hours in Bellevue, they're actually going into a place that they get wraparound services. There's going to be a need for community and faith-based leaders who can support those behavioral health centers that are coming in, that can be referral partners for when people are leaving them. So I think you could think really strategically about how you could be a part of the future model of public safety, which is about public health. And then just, somebody who's been working with young people who are involved in violence in the court system for 15 years. The magic ingredients are this: food, good food. I feed my kids good.
Yes.
The magic ingredients are food,
Absolutely.
consistency. I show up every time, whether you're there or not, I show up. And I show up even when you do something wrong, right? Love. I love my kids. Love, love, love. I have kids I still talk to from 15 years ago. They're having babies now. Makes me feel very old. So it's food, consistency, love, and then opening them up to opportunity.
Yes.
Bringing people in, taking them. We just brought our boys to Columbia University the other day. They got to walk around and experience it. They don't even have their GEDs yet, but now they have that growth mindset. I can't just envision myself here. I have a picture of myself on this campus and I belong here, right? With teachers and peers that look like me walking me around. So love. And then the last thing, which if you could pull it off, or this is where your city partnerships come into play, is stipends. So for example, a lot of people don't have money to pay kids, but like the God Squad and the Flatbush Leadership Academy, they use what the city has is the Anti-Gun Violence Employment Program. It's like SYEP, but it's year-round. So they enroll the kids, they're getting their stipends, so God Squad doesn't have to pay for that, the city is paying for that, right? But they're providing that programming. So you can leverage your city and state partners. The state also has summer youth employment money that you can access. so that they can provide payment to the young people, provide food, and then provide that programming that gives them access to resources and opportunity, but most importantly, consistency and love.
Can we give a big hand to our panel? Excellent information. Because we're at the end of our time, we will forego our last question. There are, I know, at least 2 questions from the audience, so I would like them to ask their question. Can I get someone, Chris, can you come and bring the mic? We're gonna ask my brother Rojas to ask this question. Then I'm gonna ask one of my academic mothers, Dr. Lundy, to ask her question, then the sister here on the end. So please stand, tell us your name, and ask your question.
Well, first of all, it's always a pleasure. First of all, it's always a pleasure to be here. My name is Edgar Rojas. I'm the president and founder of Trans-Diaspora Network, an organization that works with youth and is in consultative status with the United Nations. It's not about talking anymore. We can have as many panels you can
Okay,
have.
let me stop.
No.
Ask your question.
I'm
Okay.
going to ask my question.
All right.
But let me introduce my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I?
Yes.
Sir,
Thank
be
you.
brief with it though. please.
Yeah, don't worry. So in a way, what I'm trying to say here, that we know the facts already. It is all about action, and our youth are dying out there. I'm not joking, the statistics are staggering. And the violence in the street is amazing. You can bring as many resources you can bring, but it is time to act, to do something about it. I have been engaged with the UN for the last 8 years. And I have worked in the street with Pastor Gil from Monroe's. And we have seen that programs sometimes fell short in doing follow-up. And it's true, we need data in order to make our programs impactful. Otherwise, we keep doing the same thing and getting the same results. Okay? So my question is, thank you, sir, for allowing me to make my question. My question is, how community members, not only the police, not only community-based organizations, but how the community is going to engage on this? How families are going to be part of the solution? Because they go through a lot of trauma, so how we are going to get them out of those trauma? It's not basketball, it's not this, it's not that, it's a trauma. Okay, so that's my question. Sorry about my passion, but this is what I am. Okay, sorry, sir.
No.
Okay, sorry.
There's no need to apologize. I'm just trying to be respectful of our time.
Okay.
So you're fine. I love the passion. We need more people that's passionate, right? So who on the panel would like this? So if I understand your question correctly,
Yeah.
crime is increasing, it's going through the roof. Programs are falling short. Many of them are falling short. In order to really make an impact, we have to really reach the families and get people in the communities involved in fixing the problem. How do we reach families and communities?
It goes back to what I said, real quick. Mentorship. We have to get together within those communities that are being affected, uptown, downtown, wherever. Wherever shootings are happening at, the same way Warm shows up, we need to show up and support and educate these people, on the resources that are available to them. Like she said, using the data, using all the information, but we have to educate the community as well. We can't just read it on the news and wait till a march happens. We have to keep showing up.
So I want to say with mentorship, I agree 1,000%. But sometimes when we hear mentorship, we think you have to be trained to be a mentor, it has to be something formal. To me, mentorship is I see somebody else, a younger person, who I can invest my life into their life and walk. It's like discipleship. It's doing life with people. It's taking time out of your schedule to do life with young people. And I can say that without any doubt in my mind that it works. A shameless plug, because New Life has been doing that for 49 years. That's what makes us distinct, is we do life with young people every day. I mean, every day. If they come with an attitude, if they come happy, if they come hungry because food insecurity is big, if they've witnessed a DV situation in their house, if ACS shows up at the site, it doesn't matter. We're doing life with them, and we are investing our life into their life every day. So sometimes you think, well, I'm not a mentor. Who am I to be someone's mentor? No, it's recognizing and discerning. Here is a God moment. When I met that young man at the train station, I knew that was a God moment. I didn't know him. He was a stranger. Like Dr. Garner said, he was a stranger. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. It was a God moment. I recognized it was a God moment. And I saw that I had something that I can invest into his life. And this is also very important for this generation, reverse mentoring. He has something, because every day he says, Doc, how are you doing? I want to check on you. I know you're checking on me, but how are you doing? And I can't even begin to tell you how that warms my heart, that he wants to make sure that my family and I are good. And I'm learning a lot about the system and how the system is really not trying to help sometimes. So it's a reverse mentoring experience
Can I
as well.
offer a quick response around the family piece? And let me just say, my brother, and thank you for your passion, right? Because passion is the ground for this work. But I want to say, families run through each of these systems.
There you go.
Okay, families run through each of these systems. Work with young people doesn't happen outside of families. In my early years of youth development as a clinician, you're focusing exclusively on young people, and then kept hitting walls when we didn't see the outcomes in the lives of young people, because young people go back to family systems. So work with young people necessitates automatically work with families. I don't want us to trivialize work with young people and families focused through programs. Programs can be transformative. They are not an end in and of themselves, but they are means to an end. And the end is forging an authentic relationship and work with young people through which they become transformed, the family system becomes transformed. So I think families run through all of these systems. Work with families for me begins not with trying to offer some spiritual solution, right? Even as a minister, because sometimes we want to move too quickly to proselytizing and giving people gospel. Live it by being attentive to what that family needs. Your prayers are nice, but if I can't pay my bills and I can't eat and I don't have a safe place to sleep, your gospel is impotent to me. Right? So respond to the needs of the family unit. That creates, and crisis creates, an opportunity for us as pastoral faith thought leaders and practitioners to enter the life of a family, of a young person in a transformative way by saying, you got a need, I can help you meet that need. And that's the starting point for transformation.
This is the way of the world now. First of all, if programs don't fail, people fail, right? The people who are running these programs, this is where we're at a deficit. But we need to expand our thinking. It's like what we said about the data. If I'm telling you that young people who experience domestic violence in the household are more likely to go on and be shooters, then if I'm trying to think about how do I do this work, I need to counsel the households through practice, through philosophy, through faith, that domestic violence is happening in, right? But the 2-gen model, like I talk about models and evidence-based, is a very effective model, meaning working with the family and the young person together. But the idea is, one, everybody could be healers. That's true. Everybody has the ability to be a healer. 2, we're all responsible for our community and its safety. And 3, when we have resources and power and access, we need to use that intentionally with the people that need it most, right? So that's where the data point comes in, right? Which families should I work with in my community? Those families, right?
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Lundy.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I have been nourished with all kinds of information. My question is a practical one, especially for my doctors on this end who are engaged in faith community congregations. We are here because we're preaching to the choir. For those people who come on Sunday and then they come the next Sunday, who are in our congregations, who may be concerned, maybe not concerned about young people. What can you say to us about how to get the average layperson who's just trying to make it to get involved in these issues?
Great question.
So one of the things that I'm going to give a shout out to my illustrious pastor in the person of Dr. Margaret Elaine Flake and Pastor Emeritus Floyd Flake. I said yesterday in a preaching moment that I was so honored and humbled that I'm in a ministry whose leadership is not intimidated of young people's gifts and giving them a platform to shine. And so River Lane has allowed me to do some very quote unquote radical, strategies just to engage people. So one of the approaches, Dr. Lundy, that I've taken recently when I was talking about trying to get everybody excited about supporting young people that were getting ready to go into college, we created like a guerrilla campaign. So for those of you who are familiar with guerrilla marketing, it's like that shock factor that you give people when you're trying to introduce them to something. And so when people were coming out of their cars, we had some people that were holding up signs about, statistics that were related to young people that were getting ready to go to college, or just the young people's experience while in college. And so I was setting the stage of actually tapping into people's psyche as soon as they were getting out of the cars. And so in the technology world, they call that user experience design. And so I used a UX perspective even in a church-based space just to start getting people's hearts attuned to what it is I was getting ready to talk to them about, right? So that's one practical step for everyday average folks, lay people who are in the pews. If you're trying to get them excited about something, go out of your way to create a larger than life marketing approach that can say it without saying it, right? So then when you say it, they can make that connection to what they saw visibly, and then with whatever you're saying, on a practical level. I think that will be an excellent approach to taking it, and it really, really does work. I would also say, I forget the other point I was about to make. Dr. Henry, you can weigh in. I just lost my other point I was going to make, but guerrilla marketing is one approach. I'm going to let you make one, and then I'm going to remember what I was about to say.
So Dr. Lundy and you and I, Dr. Lundy, by the way, is a faculty member at New York Theological Seminary. We have a lot of conversations about young people. She's also a parent. And I will say that I think sometimes we make it really complex, and it's not that complex and it's not that deep. We need to name the reality, right? So I think Dr. Lundy, as pastoral practitioners, we just need to raise the issue to the surface, because some people don't really know it's an issue until it's an issue for them, right? So there's a distance between gun violence and everybody here until it's your son or your daughter, right? Or your family member that's impacted tragically through a shooting in that case. And I think we gotta bring it close to folks to make it matter. One of the practical strategies that I love to use, I believe in the power of story, right? I believe in the power of story. There's nothing like a witness to make you a believer, right? And so even if it's not our own personal story, relaying the story of why this matters is the biggest selling point. The reality is everybody in this room is not going to be here. And if we don't do something now to ensure the future and the stability of the next generation, we're going to find ourselves living in a hostile environment, not being able to function in a reality of our own making, right? In a reality of our own making. So I think those are some quick, practical, off-the-cuff responses.
Thank you. Yes, right here, and then the sister in the back.
Hello, guys.
Yes.
I just want to say that I am a young person. And just from what they're touching on, I just want to quickly say that I'm in a summer internship with the NYPD. one of my future career goals is becoming a police officer. Just like, I'm so sorry, I forgot the doctor's name back there.
Lundy.
Yeah. I am from the foster care youth, and I do live in the Bronx, and I am related to kids who have gone through, police brutality. One of my friends was Jason Rivera, was killed on the line of duty. And it has a lot to do with the youth, because this is why I want to be a police officer. And I know we keep having these meetings, and basketball games do help. I have a friend who now he's also on the road to becoming a police officer. But my question for you guys is, you guys are having these meetings with the parents and older relatives of young people. But when are you gonna have these meetings with the actual young people?
Watch this. I went and picked her up today. I didn't know you was gonna do all this. So,
I meet with you.
go ahead.
So I'm with my young people every single week, and I bring my young people to participate in things like this when they get paid to be up here instead of me, because they are experts, they are consultants, they should be paid, and they should be treated as such. So they come to these things when they're invited, and they get to participate in the leadership capacity and compensated in the capacity in which they deserve to be. But quite honestly, I love that you're here and you asked that question. I'm tired of my young people who are experiencing so much trauma and so much failure by the adults and the stakeholders in this city. I'm tired of bringing them to places and having them have to share their pain for us to leave and nothing to change.
Right.
So I hear you.
Yeah.
My young people, and also my young people can't get into a lot of spaces because they're not vaccinated, but I hear you and I see you and I feel you, because I too am experiencing grief right now. We have to heal. The adults need to start healing and paying attention and seeing that what you're saying, you are the expert, right? You deserve to be on the panel, and you deserve to be paid to be on the panel. Not this one specifically, so to say, but what the listening tours, I'm tired of it. Again, we should be embarrassed. Listening tours, how many listening tours for how many decades do you need to sit and hear kids say what they're saying? So until you guys are ready to start making a change, there's the disconnect, right? And look, there's trauma in the room, right? This is real trauma, and what are we doing to meet that trauma?
So I want to say thank you for being in the space. The reason why I didn't put young people on the stage is because until the adults and the churches get it together, I put people up here who are not just talking about it. These people about it. Like all these people, including myself, we invest our lives in young people's lives every day in different ways. My staff, they are with these kids every day. I'm on call 12 hours a day in case something happens to our young people. So we are deeply invested, and I didn't ask anybody to sit up here who's just talking about it. All these people are about it. That's real deal. But until churches stop being religious, I preached yesterday in Atlanta about we gotta stop being religious. The form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And the power is transformation. Until churches stop being religious and stop hiding behind their religion and come out of their buildings and offer their Zoom meetings and get in the lives of the real young people that need the transformation. Jesus did not avoid the most vile people in the community. He went directly to the rejects and the marginalized people in the community and presented the kingdom. The church needs to take the kingdom to the trigger pullers. They need to take it.
And not care, this is another thing.
Yes.
I don't care if my young people show up with saggy pants. I don't care about how they wear their hair. I don't care that they have to take smoke breaks because they have so much trauma that they're self-medicating with marijuana. I don't care if they curse. I don't care about those things. They can show up as they are and be loved how they are, and not be seen as a spectacle or the baby in the basket. They are not the baby in the basket. They are not a spectacle. They do not have to ascribe to our decisions about what is respectable or safe looking or whatnot. And until we can create spaces, be it in churches or anywhere else, where we are allowing people to show up as their whole selves, because they're more themselves than we are. We're imposters when we behave like this. We have to create those spaces. Do not tell a kid to pick up his pants when he walks in, because he's turning around. He already feels rejected now.
Right. And that is a big, and I'm glad you raised that, Dana. That is a big issue in our faith communities. We want to clean the fish before we catch it. That's what the old saying is. You can't clean a fish till you catch it. But then the question becomes, are we the cleaners anyway? Because how can we talk about a speck in someone else's eye and we have a mote in our own eyes? So there's a lot I can say about that. Yes, Jason, then my sister right here.
I want to say that you have to be relatable. And when you talk about the picking up the pants, you have to educate the youth, right? So when I go out, I don't wear my pants hanging down, but I got the Nikes and the Jordans. So what I do when I encounter people who look like me or whatever race, I try to educate them. Because one thing that I learned from my mentor was, regardless if you're going to the store to buy a newspaper, you got to look the part, because you never know who you're going to encounter. So I tell this to my sister, I tell it to my friends, I tell it to the guys I hang out with. You got to be present, right? You got to be the example. So it's not just being a police officer or a community person. You have to have that passion, because how can you expect to lead if somebody doesn't believe in what you're leading them to, right or wrong? You go to a church and the pastor's preaching, but, he's the crooked one. So you're getting advice from somebody who's leading you the wrong direction. But I'm supposed to believe in you. So you have to follow your word and follow through. Just show up. We could do this all day. It's getting hot in here. Let's just work together and make this happen. That's it.
Okay, my sister in the back. Chris, take her to the mic, please. Thank you, Chris. Give it up for Chris, one of my staffers on the Lower East Side. The young lady no, go back, right there. Thank you, sir.
Hello, guys. Can you guys?
Yes.
Hello. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Hello, guys. So my name is Sophia Parker, and I'm a writer and actress. I'm currently doing a film about sex trafficking. Wow. This topic is very dear to my heart.
Yes.
I have a friend that's a survivor, and I've been working with Miss Riley from Freedom Youth, who's been helping me. One of my questions to you guys, because I heard that, gun violence in the community, that's a big problem too. But another issue that we don't talk about is sex trafficking when it comes to our young youth.
Yes.
I want to know, how do you guys have resources to help these young girls and young boys? Because it's very sickening to me that the average age for a child to be average is 11 to 14. And I'm not seeing enough services. As a young youth like me, now I'm 25, but I grew up in the foster care system, and now as a writer, I'm doing more research, and I'm finding that it's foster care youth that's being trafficked because they're vulnerable.
Absolutely.
They don't have anyone. So I need more help with that. That bothers me.
Yeah, so I'm glad you
That's why I'm
asked.
doing this film.
So my third question actually touched on that. So I'm gonna read my third question to you. Many of the youth in our communities have realities that church has traditionally deemed as controversial or challenging to address. This includes issues of sexuality, gender identity, human trafficking, substance abuse, incarceration, and other experiences. And so I was going to ask the panel, what would you recommend? What recommendation would you give to faith leaders regarding how to stay true to their beliefs, but yet be open to having the difficult conversations with youth around the topic? Now you have taken it a step further. You're talking about resources, right?
Resources,
That's
but-
another.
Immediately and ask her to come, and there they are over there. And we'll talk more. And they have a whole facility, they have a whole site, and we'll get into more of that later. I just wanted to be brief, but I got you. And if there's something that you think that's missing within the NYPD, we can go through the right channels and make sure that we see it happen. I promise you that. This is not just talk. We can go to the right people. And,
I want us to be clear. The NYPD does not have the capacity or the expertise to help victims of human trafficking and sex trafficking, but, and this is being piloted, unfortunately, again, this is what I mean about intentional and impactful collaboration. This has been not piloted, this was rolled out, and it's not being used at the capacity it should be used at the NYPD. There's a program called CLEAR. They hire peers, people that are called peers. I don't know if you know this program. And what it was supposed to be was, if somebody came in was arrested for prostitution, we could use the correct language, but the penal law, prostitution. So prostitution, then it was substance abuse, like personal use, and now we're trying to do petty larceny as well for shoplifting. The precinct is supposed to call a CLEAR peer, and that peer is supposed to come to the precinct and meet with that person immediately. So one, it diverts the prosecution so that that person that comes in for quote-unquote prostitution isn't prosecuted, but two, it connects them to services. The role of the NYPD is not to help those young people because they do not have the expertise or the capacity to do so. The role of the NYPD is to utilize the community partner that does have those expertise and make sure that you're connecting that person in real time to that CLEAR peer. Now what we're finding is, again, this is where it goes back to data and being intentional, are they using that program at the capacity that they should be? Is the desk sergeant picking up the phone and saying, hey CLEAR, we have somebody who just got brought in? And the answer is, in a lot of precincts, no. So where we need this shift to happen is, we know that WARM exists, we know that CLEAR exists, RISE exists, there's all these different programs. We need to ensure that the agency that has the information, which is the NYPD, delivers that information in real time to that organization or agency that can respond with what that young person needs. So I would advise, if you want to talk afterwards, I can connect you to CLEAR, when you're doing your research, to see that this program was created so that people can avoid prosecution for prostitution and can get services. But if we're not connecting to people, to those services in real time, we're losing them, right? So that's where I think we need that critical shift.
Thank you. So let me go ahead, Apostle, and then Dr. Garner.
And I just wanted to give some more resources and thank you for speaking up. Also, as someone who grew up in foster care, and for the young woman over there, I really appreciate you all speaking up. And then I want to say something also about the analogy I used about Moses, because I think some things are getting lost. So Not On My Watch was founded by Reverend Q English, who now works with the White House, but she's a Black woman from the Bronx. And her organization has been on the field around sex trafficking for Black and brown women before it was in the media. So they're,
I remember that.
yes, their website is,
I tried to email already.
Okay, well, I can connect you directly with her. So let's exchange information. And then also Connect NYC works on domestic violence from a very progressive framework. And they also work with people who are sex trafficked. And my close friend is the coordinator. So let's connect, but I wanted everyone to know about those organizations. And then the Women's Community Justice Association was founded by Reverend Sharon White Harrigan, who served in Bedford Hills Prison. They're leading the advocacy campaign to close the women's prison at Rikers, and that's another organization that is led by a woman of faith that we should connect with, because often when we talk about policing and gun violence, we miss the gun violence that's really domestic violence. And we also miss the fact that the highest person entering prison for the first time right now are Black women of childbearing age. And so I want to share that a lot of times the conversations are very much our boys, which is important. I have 3 little brothers, but we also have to realize dark-skinned girls of every race are suspended 3 times more than their lighter-skinned counterparts for the same infractions. And they also get 12% longer prison sentences. So let's just be mindful of what she's bringing up. And finally, when I made the analogy about who you're pulling out of the Nile, I don't see Moses as a passive person. He grew up to help liberate his people. And my career has been dedicated as a person from the ranks of the poor to organizing and activating people to liberate themselves. It wasn't an analogy that like poor kids need to be saved, because I come from that. So I just wanted to be clear about that, because sometimes we can think that we know the theology of others, but I want to be clear so no one leaves confused that he's pulled out of the Nile so he can live another day to help liberate his people. And at Bronx Connect, when we were advocating, the court-involved youth chose the campaign, so I would encourage people. I know I threw out a lot of organizations, but I want people to know the grassroots organizations that are working on the ground.
And so what I want to say, thank you, Apostle All Love, for sharing that information. And I see you, young lady. We got a lot of people sharing great information, so I didn't forget you. Just have a really good memory, trust me. So this is, I hope, impactful for you. Has this been impactful for you? Yes. There's been a lot of information and things that have been shared. I want to just emphasize the heart of this event. Is that we are here because we want to let you know that New Life is doing the long haul with you. We are walking with you. This is not just a one event and then you exchange cards and then you go back to your corner. No, we are a source of information, of resources to empower you to keep impacting the youth where you are. We have been doing this for almost 50 years, and we want to share not only our expertise, but also some of our relationships to empower you to keep doing the work. One of the things we're going to do, you know, a lot of information has been thrown out today. You may not have captured all the information. We're going to create a resource sheet for you and get it out to everybody that's here so that you can know people you can go to. I'm telling you, you need to know who you can call. But when you call people, and even the people who you may exchange cards with today, again, don't make this just, oh, I need your card, so don't make it transactional. Don't make it transactional, meaning, well, I just need your card to get this information to say I got it. No, this is about building alliances, because one of the things I've heard several times in the room is a part of the reason why things are not changing is because we're not collaborating across sectors, and we cannot collaborate if we don't have authentic relationships. Yeah. So I didn't invite you all here just to say you came to my event. No, we asked you to come because we know that we have to build collaboration across government, city agencies, faith-based communities, community-based organizations. We have to be talking and working together and not afraid to help each other, because if you win, I win. It's not oh, I have to win at the expense of you. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to just put that out there. I want my young lady right there, so like she's stating her case. Is that your daughter, Vern Jones? Yes. Like she's stating her case. Stand up, young lady. Yes.
Okay, so my name is Alexandria Jones. I'm 13, so I ain't got. But one of the things I heard you say is that the church needs to be more accepting of children who might not look as what may be considered presentable in today's society, such as like when you said with their pants hanging down, or when they have to take smoke breaks, or you allow them to curse. And I understand that, but my question is, why are you waiting for the acceptance of a small majority of churches when there are plenty of churches that make the effort to get to know their community and work outside of their community? Because I promise you, if you find a church like that and build relationships with them, like you said, then it'll be very easy to connect with other children rather than the ones that you primarily work with.
So
that's a comment. That's a comment, not a question.
Yeah, so I think it is a statement, but a very valid statement. So what I want to say is, when you're in the work of leadership, you're constantly throwing out the net. You're constantly prodding those who are not active to get active, in hopes that with every contact, somebody who was asleep will wake up. If you only say, well, forget about the ones who are not active because there are those that's active, you never know when it may be this moment that a church that was asleep or a pastor that was not engaged, they just needed that touch. My mother was sharing this story with me when I was in Atlanta this weekend about Jesus healing the blind man, and the first time he touched him, he says, "What do you see?" "I see men like trees." And he says, "Go again." Sometimes it takes more than one touch point to get people active and involved. My assignment as executive director of New Life is to encourage faith-based leaders, community-based leaders to care about the unseen youth in this city. And as the city rushes back to normal, to not forget those who have been marginalized. And to continue to work with ministries who are doing the work as a model and a role model. Because some churches are not engaged because they just honestly don't know where to start, or don't know how to get engaged, or if they even should be involved. Some churches really think their only role is to pray, right? And so I'm challenging them, yeah, pray and do something, right? So that's why. We are working with churches that's very involved, but there's also churches who we want to encourage to be involved. Yes. If I understood what you were saying correctly. Yes. All right. We are way past our time. We are 40 minutes past our time. I'm going to wrap. Come on, Minister Cynthia. Can we give a hand to our panel? Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you all so much for your patience. We are out of time for this panel discussion, but we can still continue to be in this room and engaging and asking questions. But what we do not want you to walk away without doing is giving us your information, your organizational information, because we do want to be intentional about making that resource sheet. So for at least those in the room, and we're going to email that out as soon as we go ahead and check it and make sure you're not going to have something that bounced back. But the other thing that we have, another resource we have at New Life, is that we're having a summer camp, for a sleepaway camp for young people starting in July. And so on the back of the flyer that you see for this event, there is a flyer about the camp. If you have young people, particularly the middle school age kids, junior high school, we still have slots available. The usual expectation was that they would pay a $75 registration fee, and we would cover the additional fee, which amounts to hundreds. But we will even suspend that at this point if you have young people that you believe are in trouble and need an experience like this. And so our staff, please stand. You can see either of these young ladies, and they work in our sites in Manhattan and Brooklyn, who can help you in terms of making that connection. Our goal is to make connections for not just, the other connection is the opportunity to, every time I think, sometimes you look and you see there's a grant opportunity, right? You say, oh, and it needs a faith organization and a community organization and a school. We're in the room. So we need to be able to build collaboration so we can go for that money. And we talk about unemployment and people still looking for jobs. When you create new programs, you're also creating new jobs. And so all of that stuff just keeps going and going and going, and we grow our community. We can't do it all today, but we thank you for being here to start the conversation, and we're going to allow someone to come and close us out in prayer as we continue to go around the room and share. We still have the space. We just don't want to keep you captive. Amen?
I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge one of our board directors is here, Zachary Limke. Please stand, Zachary. He's one of our board directors for New Life. Thank you, Zachary.
And another partner in the room is the Community Initiative of New York. Is that right, Al Cohen? Okay, and so he's here. He's got resources for you. Many of you didn't register and let us know, but I know you've got resources that you can share with one another. So make sure I get the information, but not just the business card. I need to know the tagline. I need to know what you do. So when we're sending this out, people will know exactly how you can help. Thank you.
I also want to acknowledge some of our new staff people who will be starting in a couple of weeks are here. But our new staff people, please stand. I want to acknowledge you. James Harvey, who will be our new director of the Lower East Side, or Shannon, who will also be on the Lower East Side. Glad that you came. Thank you. I want to ask, I'm going to put on the spot, Dr. Kennedy, will you please come and close us out in prayer? Yes, I know I put you on the spot. She works with Lee NYC, but she also, again, is the international chairlady for our youth department for the Church of God in Christ. So please come and close us out.
I just feel refueled, refreshed, revived, and ready to go further. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you. You are great. Thank you for this day, this time, this gathering. Lord, we thank you that nothing that we've spoken about, nothing that we've covered has caught you by surprise. You have given us the capability and even the resources within ourselves to be able to answer the needs of the little ones who you've called the little ones. Thank you that you are so concerned about young people that you said it would be better for someone to tie a millstone around their neck and be cast into the sea than to mess with or bother the little ones. Help us to take the burden that you care so much about and take it up and put down our religion, our tradition, and take up your heart and your burden. This is nothing new for you. You are the God of generations. This our young people, and whatever we want to call them, whatever category we want to place them in, there's nothing new. You are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You are a generational God. Help us to collaborate, to put our egos aside, our differences, our agendas, and to take up the burden of heaven. We thank you. Bless every organization here, these officers that are out in the trenches, those that are working in nonprofits, those that are working in the education sector. We thank you for a revival, but not the revival that we sit in our churches and lift our hands and just sing praises to you, but the revival that brings us out into the streets, the revival that causes us to take up a wailing and a passion and go find the ones that you care so much about. And we thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please, at this time, meet people, network, make connections.